What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hoof Podcast, now on the Built in Buffalo Network. Welcome in, welcome in. My name is Eric. This is my co-host, Anthony. Been in the game a long time, and now we're officially on Built in Buffalo. Very happy to be here. Looking forward to working with everybody and chatting with everybody.
Yeah. Just a new platform for us. We're excited to be on board and get started with everybody, and for the listeners to get to hear us again, right? Like, this is going to be another great way to interact with people. And like you said, we've been doing it a long time now. It's weird to be considered veterans at this, I guess, now. But, it's just fun to talk football and talk Bills, right? That's what we love to do. That's the best part of all of this. So excited to dive into it week by week with you. We'll still have our Tuesday shows and Thursdays here on Built in Buffalo, and super excited. So give it to us, guys who are listening and everything. We love to interact. So definitely shoot us messages and everything. We'll do our best to interact as we go.
Yeah, and it's a really fun time of year, right? It's Combine. We're all kind of evaluating. So many great resources out there for all the draft prospects and like good fits for the Bills, right? But this time of year is like, we're just one player away. It's hope season, right? That one player is going to get us to the Super Bowl. It's going to get us past Kansas City. So it's always kind of fun. There's no negativity, it feels like, this time of year.
Right. Every team has hope, not just our Bills, but every team thinks they're one player away or one draft away from, taking that next step and being competitive. And in some cases, I mean, look at the Texans last year, the jump they made, that was great. And in other cases, it's the Bills where, you have to find a way to take that next incremental step. We're already winning the division every year, getting the playoffs every year. It's that, like you said, getting over the hump and getting past Kansas City, which really seems to be the monkey on our back right now. And I know I'm personally excited. I think there's multiple ways that the Bills are going to be able to do that this offseason, regardless of what changes Kansas City makes, right? Because we know they have a lot of cap space, everything. They're going to get better themselves. But the Bills are in control of their own fate and have a lot of things they can do, in my mind, to put them moving forward still, right? Inching them forward rather than maintaining where they've been even. I want to take that next step. Obviously, we want to get to the Super Bowl. That's the ultimate goal. We've got to do it.
Yeah, it kind of feels like I will say a turning point this year in the draft, right? It feels like you have to hit on these picks, right? The roster is one of the older rosters in the NFL right now. So it feels like we have to move to kind of a younger roster. Let's get some guys in here who we can keep for long term, right? It feels like a very important draft in that way where you can't really afford to miss on at least the first 3 rounds, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that could set them back quite a bit.
Yeah, and when you look at successful teams, that they're good at doing that, right? These are the guys who you want to be contributors for the next 4 or 5 years and starting more immediately. I think, if you listen to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane at the Combine, their initial interviews, they kind of talked about how, or at least McDermott did, about how these younger guys are contributing sooner. And if you want to compete, the NFL is becoming a younger man's game. You've got to stay in it. To stay in it, you've got to continue to draft young players who can contribute on day one. And like you said, that's more likely to be, you're always going to have the diamond in the rough guys who are 5th, 6th, 7th round picks who end up playing in their first year and looking good, right? But ideally, it's that round 1, 2, and 3 who are there 4 or 5 years starting caliber, and then you're talking extension after that, right? So that's really what you have to rely on when you're a good team and you're paying big money to your quarterback, which most good teams are, right? So those are the 2 factors, I think, that make it even more important to hit on draft picks. And a team like Kansas City, you see that throughout their entire roster, right? And it's not just the early round picks, it's the later round guys as well. You need contributions all the way around. But we've seen, I trust Beane and McDermott to, again, continue to do that and hopefully see the same holes that we all do that need to be filled and make the right moves.
Yeah, some of them are glaring holes, like defensive tackle.
Correct. Yeah, there's
currently, I
think
there's one on the roster at this time, right?
Yes,
so that's definitely something to pay attention to. And to kick off the Combine, the defensive linemen go first, right? So that started at 3 today. Like, don't lie to me though. Do you watch the Combine?
Like, I watch afterwards when there's guys that I know are on the radar, but it's not like I have a TV tuned to it, watching guys
Yeah.
run 40 or whatever. I mean, and I keep up with the headlines. So like, I saw that there's a lot of defensive tackles, defensive linemen who are running very impressive 40s.
Yes, it is
But again, to
impressive, no
me,
doubt.
I'm not a, run down the tape X's and O's guy. Obviously, we do our evaluations and give our opinions, but I never understand the obsession with something like a 40 time. Like, okay, he could be a fast D lineman, but does that translate to putting your hand in the dirt and getting to the quarterback, which is not 40 yards, right? It's 10 yards max, right?
Right.
You really got to have that launch, that speed, those things. So maybe you could argue the cone drill and all those other things give you insight into that. But to me, I would rather spend my time watching their play on the field against good opponents and seeing, the real live football snaps than the combine numbers. You have to look at it. You have to analyze it. And really what I think matters more about the combine is the meetings with teams. And you hear things that come out of that. Oh, this guy didn't do very well didn't give good answers on this question, or these guys really impressed everybody they met with. And that's
which is all rumors and speculation, right? You don't really know unless you're in the room, so that's
right.
Kind of outside looking in.
But what we do know, again, knowing this team, what we do know is Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are not going to draft a guy who has character questions, right? Like, they're not going to draft a guy who's, like,
they're not going to draft him.
No character flaws are going to be drafted by the Buffalo Bills, unless there's some sort of otherworldly talent and they think they can deal with it internally. But where we're drafting, like, that's not going to be the case. And we know historically that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, character matters to them. The way you present yourself in these meetings is what moves guys up the board for the Bills, right? In the series that the Bills do to release kind of their behind the scenes after it all happens, we've seen that over the past couple of years, right? That's exactly where the Bills come in, and you see the conversation between Beane and McDermott. Man, they came super prepared. Man, he brung a binder full of notes and was ready to go. And man, he really knew the answers to this. So that's what.
I know who you're talking about, Kyrie Elam. That hasn't really transferred.
Right?
That hasn't really transferred yet. By
right,
the way.
But the point still stands that that's the type of guys that they look for, and those are the traits that move them up the board. They're not so much interested in, oh, he ran the best 40. Yeah, maybe that moves them up a little, but not in terms of where the Bills are placing them on the board.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely. There's no secrets either. I think Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are very transparent in what they're about, what they look for. And that's been true the whole time they've been here, right? And it still remains true. But yeah, I'm like you. I kind of watch the combine in the background, go back and watch it later. The only time I was really engaged in the combine was in 2018 when the Bills were trying to get a quarterback.
Yes,
that was a fun year. But besides that, I mean, it's best to go back and watch it later when you have time, right? Because it is long, right? It's still on right now. Started at 3. I mean, it's hours long.
It goes all the way through the weekend. Yeah.
Linebackers are on right now. Defensive linemen are on earlier today. Tomorrow is defensive backs and tight ends. Starts at 3 p.m. on NFL Network. Saturday, we have the quarterbacks, receivers, running backs. That starts at 1 Eastern time. And then Sunday, offensive linemen, 1 p.m. Eastern. But it is impressive that, you mentioned how fast the defensive lineman can run. That has really changed the last 5-6 seasons, where they've gotten so fast now. Like, all edge players are expected to run like a 4.5. The good ones, right?
Right. That's insane.
It's insane. And
you're not talking about, these are not small guys, right? These are not wide receivers who are coming in at under 200 pounds. These are 280 pound plus guys running 4.5s, right? That's really impressive.
Yeah. Chop Robinson ran a 4.4 today.
I did see that,
which is impressive. Which, it's interesting. Does he have similarities to Micah Parsons? They're on the same team, right? It seems like Penn State really is looking for that type of player. It'll be interesting to pay attention to him leading up to the draft.
That's a high.
I've seen him in the first round. I've seen him in the second round. He just kind of one of those guys that's all over the place.
I think that's the nature of defensive tackle as well. It's not as, flashy as wide receiver or quarterback or some of these guys that will go in the first round and probably move up, even though a defensive tackle might be a better talent on a big board overall. Teams are more likely to go with the flashier positions over a guy like a defensive tackle, who, even though he's one of the best players in the draft, maybe, right?
Right. And Latu 4.6 today. And again, I think he'd be the top defensive lineman
He's
on the
slow,
board.
right?
Yeah.
4.6.
4.6,
Yeah, that's crazy.
insane. Yeah.
That's a good time, by the way. That's I'm being joking there, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. To
Well,
have
he
a
has the
big guy like
fastest,
that.
I think, of this class of the edge players, he has the fastest release. And I think if he didn't have the medical issue in his neck, I think he'd be the top guy this year, right? But it looks like he's going to be falling back because of the medical stuff. But still looking healthy. 4.6, I mean, it looks fine to me, right? Jared Verse, 4.5, one of the other top defensive ends. 4.5, again, just seeing all these guys run extraordinary speeds. You know, Jared Verse started off in Albany.
I didn't.
Went to
Oh,
University
wow.
of Albany, redshirted. It's a little local favorite.
New
If
York
you want to call
connection.
Albany
There you
local,
go.
I don't know.
Yeah, New York State. It's still
Yeah. It's about as local as it gets. And then really what's impressive is the Texas defensive tackles, right? Trevonjay Sweat,
Yes.
366 pounds. He played at
Unbelievable.
370 during the season, right? And he was still faster than Tom Brady in the 40, which isn't just insane to think about.
love
But also
that.
watch some of his drills, right? A guy that big that can move like that, you just don't see it, right?
Yes.
I think
yes.
Jordan Davis for the Eagles, somebody we saw do that a couple years ago at that size. And he went really early. So again, Trevonjay Sweat, just seeing him in the second round, seeing him in the first round, he's kind of one of those guys all over the place. And I think the big question around him is, can he be explosive? You know, if he doesn't seem to be really explosive on tape, but he can move around. Great run stopper. Right. And really, I don't know if he needed to be explosive because the other guy playing next to him, Brian Murphy, the second,
also
at Texas, and you can just watch the combine, watch his tape. He is extremely explosive.
Yes. Yeah. And both, I mean, all of these guys you've mentioned are on the Bills' radar, right? These are players that have been talked about with connections to the Bills. You know, obviously the Bills, like we talked about, need defensive tackle a lot, right? And it's natural to look at the draft and see where these guys are going to fall and will they be there at 28 and whatever. And yeah, so it's interesting that for some reason, it seems like this year, there's usually a couple guys are going to go in the first round, right? At edge, especially, or, defensive tackle that could go or will go there. And here we are comparing them to guys in the past who have gone early in the first round, and yet, they might fall to the second. That's what excites me, I think, because the Bills obviously only have that one first round pick, and knowing the needs that we have, it's the second round that's going to be that sweet spot, I think. That's going to be where we get a player that's going to be very valuable that could have been a first round pick, just like last year, right? Osiris Torrance was exactly that description, right? He was being mocked as early as, top 15 in a lot of drafts. And I had him there all of my mocks for the most part, and he fell to the second round, and the Bills said,
so far, I think he's Brandon Beane's best second round pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. And that's
Epinesa came on late,
yeah,
and a little
not
credit,
much.
but Boogie Basham was basically a bust, right? I think we're calling it that.
Definitely. I mean, you trade him away before he even comes into his last season under contract. So I would definitely call that a bust. But that point is, there's going to be talent that falls in that second round, and I almost think that second round pick is more important, not valuable to the team, not like what they're expected to do, but more important overall with, okay, these are the guys on the board and this guy's still there and he shouldn't be, we need to go get him kind of thing in that second round. So that second round pick is probably going to be one of the more interesting ones of this whole draft for the Bills.
Yeah, I agree. Or even that, the first round pick too, right? Because
well, for me,
it's tough because I don't think there's a lot of defensive tackle depth in this draft, but there's so much receiver depth. You know what I mean? So if you want to increase your second round pick odds, I'd probably go defensive tackle or something else first. But that's only if you're playing the odds,
George.
right? Yeah, I think they'll ultimately pick a player they like, who they know that fits the system and can play year one and all those things. But if we're just playing the odds, it's such a deep class at receiver, you can get a starting caliber receiver in round 2.
I know, but that just irks me so much because you're not going to get the round 1 wide receiver, right? If you're going to wait till round 3, you're going to get a round 3 wide receiver, and expecting that guy to be the talent of a round 1 wide receiver is not good, right? You can't say, it's a deep class, we'll just turn one of these guys into the next superstar from the 5th round, right? Because it seems like there has been a later round pick who turns out to be a very good player in his first year. Great. There are always those, but to try and bank on that is bad news. To me, you do both, right? I've said this on the show before. You got to double dip at wide receiver. I want one in the first round, and I want one in round 3 or 4, right? Because like you said, it is a deep class. There are some of these guys later that I think have traits that I really want. But even in the guys I've evaluated so far, the ones who are going later for a reason. They don't have all the skills, all the elite pieces, everything I'm looking for this Bills team right now. Those round 1 guys, they at least have enough for me to say they could plug and play week 1 for the Bills this season. And that's what I think we need at that position, which is why I'm mostly on board with ideal situation, wide receiver in round 1, position of need in round 2, wide receiver again in round 3 or 4.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, right? But at the end of the day, there's only one football.
Exactly.
Right? You got to – Diggs has to have his production, right? He's getting paid to have production. Sure. Kincaid, I think, is going to take a step. I think we're all expecting him to take a step. So I think he'll have more targets. Shakir now coming up, right? Also going to get more targets, I would assume. So, like, do you need a first-round guy right away? I mean, you have so little time to develop in this system. I mean, James Cook also, you can dial it up, right? And he'll take some targets from receivers.
Well, yeah, if you're looking to develop a guy, that's one thing. But I think we need impactful X receiver this season, right? Like, that's why I'm saying take one early. Shakir was a late round pick, and he's great. But this is, 3 years later now. This isn't year 1 for him. It wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. We knew he was a good piece. We knew he was a very talented wide receiver, just like we're saying about guys in this draft. There will be a guy like Khalil Shakir later in those rounds that we should think about and go after. But that's not going to give you the impact you need on day 1 at wide receiver. This is a position of need for a reason. It's not a position where we're looking for depth. We are, but we need starting caliber, not just, hey, you're the 5th, 6th guy, you get a few snaps a game, whatever. That's going to be if we draft somebody later, right? It has to be impactful day 1, starting caliber guy, in my mind. The Bills have not drafted a guy like that in a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So, Sammy Watkins guy ain't walking through that door, right? So we need I think,
Sammy.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So we really need just, I think in my mind, still where I'm at today, and this may change before the draft. And usually what ends up happening is there's a lot of buzz just before, early after the season ends. Hey, this is the position that it needs to be. All this talk happens, and then we end up full circle, and the Bills go right back to what we said they would do immediately after, meaning the most buzz and conversation was around right as the season ended. All of this happened over the last couple of years. We've talked about it. The ridiculous, the Bills need a running back in round 1. No, we'll take the running back in round 2. This season, I think there is some of that talk, not running back, but other positions that I'm like, no, that's definitely not happening in round 1. I don't care who's there. I'm at least on board with wide receiver in round 1 right now. Yeah. It has to be.
And you always have tunnel vision. It's this, not this, black and white.
Well, I've been right, haven't I? I mean, that's when I said it wouldn't be running back, I said it would be this position. It was, right? The last few years, I've had the position dead on with who the Bills have drafted in those spots early on. And it's because, again, I stuck to my guns when everybody else was changing.
No, I said, I don't know if you had Kincaid last year. I don't know if anybody had Kincaid.
Well, I did not.
Dawson Knox, right?
Right.
You just paid him not too long ago.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like, everyone was kind of shocked with the Kincaid. I think everyone liked the pick.
In the moment, I did, though, right? This is also what happens live during the draft. There's people who fall. I had Kincaid as my number 11 on my board. So when he was still there, when the Bills picked, he was the guy I wanted. I said they better be drafting Kincaid here because he's the best guy on the board by far, and he fulfills the pass catcher need. So I didn't say tight end, no, but we knew it was pass catcher that was really the ideal situation there, and we got one of the best ones in the draft in my mind in Kincaid, and that's turned into at least so far, a great acquisition, and I think he is going to take an even bigger step going into year 2. So I'm still very excited about that pick.
And you're going pass catcher again is your biggest.
Correct. And I mean, we've had same conversation we've had here before. You have Josh Allen. You've got to build around Josh Allen. You cannot Your best player by far is Josh Allen. I know we have needs on defense, but we've been building around the defense for years when we have Josh Allen saying, well, he's Josh Allen. We'll just put whoever around him and let it happen. We'll give him Stephon Diggs and fill in the blanks around him. And this guy or that guy who wasn't quite a star over there. And yes, Josh Allen will elevate any player who comes in beyond their best, right? That's the Josh Allen X factor. But we need to bring in talent that's already high so Josh can take them higher. And I think that is the move that the Bills have not done. They started doing it last season by taking Kincaid, right? And saying, look, we are going to do this, invest in this. I think you double down on that this year by taking a wide receiver and then finding a way to use the cap and all that to fill in the other positions of need. And that's going to be what positions you best.
I'm not going to be upset if they take receiver because, I'm all in on, I personally think Josh Allen could break the touchdown record. And I think people are going to be like, wow, this guy's crazy. But you have that caliber of quarterback, right? You have an extra game now. Let's at least go for it. And I think if you bring in a top receiver, you kind of have the firepower to do that sort of thing, right? Not saying it's going to happen or I'm predicting that, but you have a quarterback that's capable of doing something like that, right?
Correct.
And go all in on that. However, currently as it stands, I feel like defensive tackle's got to be in this conversation as well, right? You have one defensive tackle on the roster, and he's a hell of a player. And we've seen that Oliver. He's a lot better when there's, when Daquan Jones is in there, somebody opposite him, so he doesn't get doubled every single play, right? So I feel like if you did take a defensive tackle early, it's going to really open up opportunities for the edge players at Oliver, even the linebackers, right? So
I like what you said.
It needs to be a conversation for sure.
I like the early and not first round. Sure, early, sure. Early. What do you call early?
Yeah.
Second round, third round, maybe. But for me, I'm still saying wide receiver in round one. I think that's
the
going
flashy
to be what
pick. I think everyone, we're
it's
all going to sleep great
that night
if they took a top receiver. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that doesn't mean the defense. Look, we saw it this season. Sean McDermott turned third, fourth off the street, going on vacation with his family players into starting caliber, holding the fort down on defense level, right? He took blood from a stone with the injuries we had on defense throughout the year into the playoffs. Sean McDermott and this defense was able to succeed and hold down the fort. Now, they weren't shutting guys out the way we would expect, a perfectly healthy Sean McDermott defense to be at the caliber of doing. But with the injuries, they were still a well-oiled machine. They were still well prepared. They were still playing okay. And, I thought if we were one player away, one linebacker healthier, we would have beat the Chiefs, on our offense and defense. That's why I think you move the offense forward. You let the defense do what Sean McDermott can do with it. You do have to make investments. You do need to get players on the board, right? We need safety. We need defensive tackle. We'll see how free agency shakes out. That's always going to affect it. But in my mind, even if we sign a free agent wide receiver, we're still going to need to draft one in the first round because you're looking long-term. You're looking right now. That's why I still value that in the first round. If we end up signing 4 free agent defensive tackles, well, then we're not talking defensive tackle in round 1 anymore, maybe in round 3, right? So it's a fluctuating conversation. And I do think ultimately that's how it's going to work out.
Yeah. And if you do take a defensive tackle in round 3, it's more kind of the carousel they've been doing with Tim Settle and Linville Joseph. I mean, it just contributes to that. You add another guy to the rotation and you just rotate them through, right? I don't know if we know what this team would look like with an impactful defensive tackle, like somebody like Trevonde Sweat or Brian Murphy Jr. I feel like it really changed the dynamic of the entire defensive line, right? And we just haven't seen that yet. And in Daquan Jones, he's a good player, solid for us, right? But again, he's 33. How many more years can you rely on like him? You got to go out and find somebody like him who's younger. But why not do that in the draft, right?
And we also know that the Bills rotate their defensive line like crazy, right? So that's not going to go away anytime soon. So you need bodies in there that are, capable, right? So I hope maybe the key to keeping Daquan Jones healthy is, rotating him out a little more and finding another guy who can be at that same level or, at least same talent. It is. You're not gonna pay them the same. But there's free agency. You have to answer those questions of depth on the defensive line. and we'll see. I have a feeling most of that is going to happen in terms of free agency, signing players, and not the draft. But we do need a defensive tackle in the draft. In fact, I was saying last year I thought we should take one in round 2 or later, and we didn't. And now that makes it even more of a pressing need, I think, going into this season, because like you said, having those guys under contract for 4 years at least, or 5 potentially, that is going to affect you much better long term than just signing free agents to 1-year deals and seeing how that works. You're going to kick the can down the road, basically, if you do that.
Yeah, keep dipping in the bargain bin, right? It's been working. All right, let's get into it. We have 5 possibilities here. I just went with the 5 top needs for the Bills: defensive tackle, edge, receiver, safety, and I actually just threw running back in there because it's fun. Like, I know you probably don't need a running back, but they're going to sign somebody, right? So yeah, we have the first 2 rounds of the draft, just different scenarios of who the Bills could take to fill these needs. A couple free agent signings, and then maybe a re-sign, right? Because we know they can't re-sign everybody, right? So you pick one, maybe you pick 2. So I threw up 5 possibilities, right? Number 1, the Bills draft Troy Franklin in the first round and Kalen Bullock out of USC, the second round safety. They re-signed Daquan Jones and Leonard Floyd, and then we signed Zach Moss for the tush-push role.
That's the funniest part of this whole thing, I think, right? Re-sign Zach Moss, bring him back.
Yeah, but I think everyone's happy with Troy Franklin. He seems to be the favorite for everybody, right?
Yes, I was gonna say, well, a lot of people are on Brian Robinson as well, but I think more likely in my mind is Troy Franklin, and I might say he's more natural fit for what we need position-wise. I like both, don't get me wrong, but Franklin, I think, is the better fit. So I'm already happy with that. We took wide receiver. We took a guy I'm very happy with. I think can do exactly what I've already explained here on this show. And then, you move forward with that and you're good to go. And so that opens things up, like I was saying earlier, for that second round pick. In this scenario, you have that being safety. Now, Bullock is one of the best safeties by far in this draft. So for him to fall to a place where we could pick him in the second round, I'm guessing that would have to be a trade up scenario. Like, he's still there, in the early or the late 30s, let's go up and get him. Right. And that's our guy. And you're moving forward. My only hesitance to that is that safety is a position where Sean McDermott, that's where he makes his money, right? That's why he's a head coach, right? Defensive backs and Sean McDermott, he knows what he's doing. And so do you need a talent? Do you need to invest a second round pick to go and get a talent at that level? Will he affect this team? Absolutely. Will he be a great addition? Yes. But in this scenario, maybe you would end up wanting to get one of those defensive tackles if they're still on the board. Everything depends on who's on the board, obviously. But if, say, there was one of those top defensive tackles still there in that same position, I think trading up to get that guy is more impactful for this team in this situation than going up and get the safety, even though I think Bullock might be higher on the board in terms of just general overall talent, right? It's not about that. It's also about the situation for this team. So I like this scenario, certainly. And with the wide receiver in round 1 is probably going to be one of my favorites, especially when you pair it with the re-signing of Daquan Jones, which I think is the most popular one amongst Bills fans to, okay, we really want to bring this guy back, so let's find a way to make it work. And we've seen what pairing him with Ed Oliver does for our defensive line. Leonard Floyd, I'm questionable on that one because I think he's going to want more money, and based on his own comments, he wants to get paid, right? So are we going to give Leonard Floyd $10 million a season? I don't think so. So I'm shakier on that one. I would love it, though, if they bring him back. He certainly showed that in the disappearance of Von Miller,
right?
He stepped up. Yeah, right. So, yeah, exactly. So in this scenario, I'd be ecstatic with those two re-signing, and the kicker on the end, like you said, signing Zach Moss. That would just be hilarious. I think that, unfortunately, Zach Moss is not interested in coming back to this team because of the way he was kind of treated early in his early years. And But I do understand what you're
Yeah.
saying here. We need a Zach Moss type. We need
Right, and
a
exactly, right. You need
pound the
that
rock
style of
guy,
running
right?
back,
Yeah,
just a
a
3rd
hard
and 1,
nose.
right? Can you a
Mhm.
different option than Josh Allen, right?
Yeah,
He fits that mold, right? I thought it was kinda funny
he's
to throw him
definitely the
back in
name.
there, but
I like that idea, right? That mold, that form, but
mhm.
probably not that player,
Right,
unfortunately.
right.
It'd be a great
Um,
story if he came back, but
yeah, couple thoughts on Troy Franklin, right? If you watch him, straight line speed. Like he doesn't really have a huge route tree. At least they didn't ask him to run a lot of different routes because
mhm,
he's so
mhm.
fast. He didn't really need to, right? Just blowing by people. So if you're going to watch the receivers on Saturday at the combine, that's something to pay attention to. Does he have the sharp angles, right? I don't think he was asked to do that, so it's not like
Hmm.
we're not saying he can't, right? But he has all the other stuff, right? Six
Yeah,
three, he's a track athlete, so super fast. I mean,
crisp, tight
would be a
windows. He
I
can
think it'd
get
be
in
an
tight
upgrade
windows.
from what we've seen from Gabe Davis, you know, as long as he can pick up the playbook, things like that, I think it'd be a no-brainer, right? Kalen Bullock, ball hawk type guy, right? Um, you know, plays zone, but like needs to work on technique a little bit. That's kind of been the knock on him, and that's why he's fallen kind of the second round. The thing with safety though is like there's not a lot of free safeties in free agency.
Yeah,
Right? So to get one early, yeah, he needs some technique work, but I think Sean McDermott's nobody's better than in training in the secondary than Sean McDermott. We say it all the time. You could train a cat to play cornerback,
yeah.
right?
So
So I
that's what
think
I
that's a
mean.
good fit, right?
Yeah, but
And it's
would
a
you
big need
use it?
outfield, right? And that's kind of
Yeah.
what the thought
In this
process was
scenario,
there.
it's a good possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. And you did mention, I mean, Daquan Jones, I think, does get re-signed. Um, but Leonard Floyd's the question mark, right? I think
Mhm.
the money's got to fall the right way. And that'll be interesting to see, right? There's a lot of talent in the free agency class when it comes to edge, but he had such a productive year that I think somebody's going to offer him a big contract, and
Mm.
the Bills won't be able to match that. But um,
Yeah.
if they
Good
could,
point
though, it'd be a
here in the
great
chat
possibility.
by Roy Collins in the chat bringing up Savage for Green Bay, right? I think that he's a free
Yeah,
agent who's out there that could be a match for Buffalo. I could see that being a guy, similar to that if Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott wanted to take a similar approach to what they did with Hyde and Poyer, where it's like, look at these guys on other teams, they're established, but they're not getting the show that we think they could do to bring them up to the level of their capabilities. I like that. I wouldn't be mad at that. And I think he's in an affordable range. He's not going to get break the bank, top level safety money. So I do like that option as well. That's a good point.
All right, let's get to the next one. I got 5 total, so plenty to get to here. Possibility number 2. They draft Brian Thomas Jr. From LSU, receiver, 6'4" receiver. There's a lot to love about that guy, right? Braylon Trice, edge, maybe doesn't have the explosiveness, but certainly a lot to like with Braylon Trice out of Washington. They re-signed Latavius Murray to push the tush, and then I got Ashawn Robinson and Terrell Edmonds at safety. Now,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
and this is okay. Daquan Jones is 33. Ashawn Robinson's a guy, 28, just getting younger, right? Can do a
Right.
lot of the same things.
Mm-hmm.
I always think like the last puff. Does he have a little bit left in the tank? Can come in and contribute, have a good year like Leonard Floyd did. I mean, that's what you're looking for, right? And I think Ashawn Robinson kind of fits that mold a little bit. And then Terrell Edmonds, just kind of a fun one, but fills that free safety need, right?
Yeah.
Got traded to Philadelphia. I think the Titans realize they're not going to re-sign him, so they get the value, trade him to Philadelphia. Was kind of quiet there, but good player who has a lot of starting experience who you might get a bargain on, right? I don't think he'll get a huge contract or anything like that. So somebody you could bring in and compete.
Right. Yeah. And there's also the special teams. Something we haven't been talking about is special teams roles, right? There are special team snaps on this team. Currently, the Bills have a lot of guys who are free agents that have been taking almost 3 phases of special team snaps, right? So you got to bring in some guys, most likely some veterans who are going to be able to hold that fort down as well. And I think, that's something to keep in mind, especially with depth at, safety, for example. But I do like this scenario. Again, this one might be a little bit more my speed, right? We're going wide receiver in round 1. I like that, right? The Latavius Murray re-sign, I think he's a little bit too over the hill for us at this point. I
Yeah.
love the guy. Don't get me wrong. He's a local Syracuse guy. Gotta love him. But and he did contribute early to this team, but can he still do it? I think there might be better options there. Let's just say that. But going edge in the second round and getting a guy of this caliber, man, I'd be perfectly happy with that, right? I'd say, okay, if Trice is still here and that's the guy that fits, and Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott agree that he's the type of guy we want to bring in here, I would love that. That's what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, the thing is, you're replacing Epinesa, who had 40% of the snaps.
Yes.
So you don't this player would fill that sort of role, right? Kind of be the secondary rotation player. I mean, we're expecting Von Miller to come back healthy. Brandon Beane mentioned it. We think he's going to be back to the old Von next year. So that'll be interesting to see. So now you have Von Miller, Rousseau. You need that rotational guy, right? And I think a guy like Braylon Trice could fill that Epinesa role. You know, it's good value in the second round as well, right? Same as Epinesa himself.
Yeah. And Epinesa in this scenario likely to move on, right? Because you're getting that edge early. You're bringing in that rotation, and I like this under the running back here. You're saying also sign Robinson, the defensive tackle. I like that move in terms of what you were saying. Depth gives you a guy
younger,
who can contribute,
right? 5 years younger,
has some ceiling there probably still, right? Hasn't been given every
got a puff left
opportunity.
Got 1 puff left.
Yeah, I like it. And then Terrell Edmonds, interesting signing there, right? We're familiar with some of the Edmonds, right? So move on from Tremaine, bring in Terrell maybe. It would be a cheap option. He's somebody who can do a lot and contribute. So I'm not mad at that either, because I still think he's a valuable guy in the locker room who can, do multiple things for your team. That's why I brought up the special teams, ability to be a leader and contribute on the field as well. You're not going to expect him to be as flashy as like the tandem of Hyde and Poyer on the field, I wouldn't think, but it's certainly a value signing when you talk about, in this case, where you're investing the money then. Okay, who else are you bringing in with this?
Right. And I'm going to ask you about, I don't know if you've done work on Brian Thomas Jr. and Troy Franklin.
I have, yes.
What do you like about Brian Thomas Jr. over Troy Franklin?
Okay, that's an easy answer for me. It's tracking, right? Tracking the ball. When I watched his tape, you see the throws down the field, he's able to get to it. And when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, that to me was like the number one thing that stood out. Ball tracking. He runs the route, you know where he's going to be. Josh Allen beams it down the field. It's a little bit overthrown. Thomas is the type of receiver who's going to have the ability to take that next step and get it, or underthrown and say, I got to come back through the coverage, and he's capable of doing that, right? So that's why I really like him as a target for the Bills. In my mind, he's gone before 28. I think Franklin is more likely to be there.
They could both be gone.
You're right, but I think
there's a lot of teams with young quarterbacks that want to help their quarterback, right?
Yes.
The Colts come to mind. The Texans come to mind. Those guys are definitely targeting receiver, I would think.
Josh Allen is an accurate quarterback, right? So we know that he can get the ball on target. Whereas some of these younger quarterbacks might benefit even more from having a guy who can do what Thomas can do. And I think that's going to be what takes him off the board earlier.
And the difference between Brian Thomas, he's in the SEC, a lot more competition there. The corners are more physical. He's winning contested catches. That sticks out
all
the
time.
tape, right?
Yeah.
But Troy Franklin, he's in the Pac-12. He's never contested because he's just blowing by people. You know what I mean? So you can't really. It's a hard comparison, right? Because,
but he's
what
still.
Do you want? I mean, Brian Thomas is a touch slower, but he can still track. But I mean, Troy Franklin just has that ability to just blow by everybody, right? So you don't see a lot of contested catches from him necessarily.
And in my mind, Franklin, the benefit there is he's still strong enough to win at the catch point against smaller guys. You do see some of that in his tape, and I think that matters, right? Not a lot, because
that's a question to ask for sure.
90% of it is deep run.
But we've seen Brian Thomas. We know he can win at the catch point,
right?
I would like to see a little more from Troy Franklin when I watch it, right? Just because we're sure he can do it, but you don't see it a lot, so it's an open question, right? But yeah, that's a good debate. I think that debate will carry right up to the
And
draft.
crisper, I
Brian
mean,
Thomas or Troy Franklin.
if you're comparing the two too, it as well, you got to bring up crisp route running, right? Like who's better? It's hard. Both of these guys are not like route running is their key number one thing, right? They're
They're X
their
receivers, right?
catchability, they're yeah, exactly, right? So they're not. It's really about getting downfield and getting open, and that's exactly what the Bills, I think, need to add to this team because right now, with the loss of Gabe Davis, that's going to be the most glaring hole.
Yeah.
But I'm happy with either one. Oh, so happy with either one. I'd be ecstatic, but I do think Thomas is gone and Troy Franklin is like more
Well, I
likely.
mean, that's a good point too. And I didn't put AD Mitchell on here, but he's definitely in that conversation as well. I think he could sneak into the first round. He's, in most rankings, he's been pretty consistent from what I've seen, the different rankings I look at. He's been right around 32 or 33, right? But he's certainly a guy that can come in, fill that Gabe Davis role. He's great in the slant routes. I mean, he just looks like the routes he ran at Texas look just like what Gabe Davis is asked to do for the Bills, right? I'm not sure how many option routes and things are like that are in their game plan, but you look at him, it's like, oh, he looks like a faster Gabe Davis, right? So it's somebody to pay attention to as well.
I want better hands than Gabe Davis personally, but that's
he has that. He has that.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, that's true.
And every single ball that for AD Mitchell is a deep ball, right? He's a deep guy through and through.
I think the biggest question I have, since we're on the point of wide receiver in the first round right now, that I haven't drawn my line yet at is if both Franklin and Thomas are gone, what do the Bills do here? Do they still pick? Do they pick their next best wide receiver? In my mind, what I would ideally like to happen is if one of those two goes, the Bills start looking at trading up to get the other. Right, trading up to whoever might.
I'm sure they will, but it takes two to tango.
Exactly, you're not always going to happen. So in a scenario where both of them are gone and you're at that position, that is one where I think, okay, do you reach for somebody who's maybe in the 30s at wide receiver, but you still really like? Maybe, but I think more likely what Bean and McDermott are likely to do in that scenario is take one of the better players on their board at one of these other positions, like defensive tackle, edge, safety, whatever it may be. God, I hope it's not safety, but defensive tackle or edge maybe. And yeah, I think that is right now a scenario that I would be disappointed in more than anything. Not because of the pick, but because those two are already gone before we get the chance.
And there's so many good receivers, though. You just look at the next two. It's Keon Coleman and AD Mitchell. How high are you on them? Right.
I'm not a big Coleman fan, so there's too much to question there, and I don't want any player like that.
Right. Well, he's certainly that player that he doesn't look great right now, but I mean, you see the traits, the physicality. I mean, I feel like he could become somebody, right? He could become.
But we're not in the position to take somebody who can
you're drafting him for his ceiling. You're not drafting him for his floor.
And that's why I said I don't care if he's the next, Marvin Harrison or whatever. We can't do that, right? The Bills are not in a position where we can draft somebody who has the best ability to become something. In the round one, it needs to be you are this guy, and we're going to maximize that, right? And we're going to.
I disagree.
You have to get better.
Like I said, you have Stephon Diggs, right? Plenty of opportunity to have someone develop on the other side of the field. Guy like Keon Coleman brings a lot to the offense, 50-50 balls. I mean, red zone. I mean, he's going to be great in the red zone, right? So, you got a couple years to buy here. You have Kincaid, you have Shakir. I mean, there's a lot to like about the Bills' offense. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about. If he can sit there a year, sit there 2 years, what's he become in year 3, right? That's kind of the big question. But do you want to take that risk? And that's
somebody is going to get a great receiver in Coleman. I think he's going to contribute. He's going to be good, but there's too many question marks there for me to want to be the team to make that move. Right? People said the same thing about DK Metcalf. Look at him. Right?
Yeah.
Teams would be dying to have that guy. Right? So
exactly. Right.
So I mean, there's, but for that same reason,
this is kind of what the combine's for too, right? Has he, what's he look like compared to the other receivers, right? What's the athletic profile look like?
And he's one where we talked earlier about the conversations. He has to walk into that room and impress the team, in my mind. If he does that, he can certainly step up to that ability where, he's right there for us with those other two guys. But right now, for me, again, I'm avoiding that, and I'm probably finding the next best wide receiver, and if he can be that guy.
Yeah.
And I haven't filled in that blank for myself yet.
All right, keep studying. Here we go. Possibility number 3. The Bills draft Chop Robinson, edge in round 1, Tez Walker in round 2. Micah Hyde comes out of retirement.
No.
And then they signed Justin Jones, Chicago Bears defensive tackle, now a free agent, and Antonio Gibson. And what I like about these 2 free agents is they're both productive players who I think are just going to get beat out, right? Antonio Gibson got beat out by Brian Robinson Jr., who's a good player, just a better player. But Antonio Gibson had some productive years, right? And Justin Jones, I think he became a big part of the Bears defensive line. But I think they're in a position to get a guy like Brian Murphy early or Johnny Newton early. So he might be on the out, right? So somebody can get in who can contribute right away, but at maybe a lower price.
Yeah, so Chop Robinson, a guy who's moving up the boards. You mentioned his 40 time, and that's weird still to talk about with edge. Certainly a talented player. Edge in the first round, him falling, being there. This to me would be that scenario where the ideal wide receivers have all been taken, and now great. Chop Robinson, I'm not going to be mad at it, but to me, this is asking for more of the same. You're asking to lose to the Chiefs again. Can we please lose to the Chiefs again? Anybody want to lose to the Chiefs again? Because you've picked edge time and time again, and you've missed. And that doesn't mean you stop picking edge, because you still need edge players. And that doesn't mean that, whoever they pick, be it Robinson in this situation at edge, isn't going to be an elite player. But you have to figure out what your strategy is and stick to it. And to me, that's what I'm worried about, because if Chop Robinson doesn't end up being, an elite level edge player, then you've missed. And I don't think, as we talked about earlier, you can afford to miss in these early picks. And even if he's a contributor, that's not good enough. You need an elite level contributor. And then in this scenario, you do get Walker in the second round, so we fill that wide receiver role. But yeah, it's really that first pick that is a little scary.
Well, let's talk about that. You said the Chiefs. Look, 1 sack ends the game, right? If you stop the Chiefs 1 time, the Bills are in a good position to win the game.
Correct.
But they didn't do it all day, right? I mean, that's why you bring Von Miller in, pay him a whole bunch of money. That's exactly what you're trying to get done, right? So, like, Chop Robinson, can he be the guy that makes that play? I mean,
over who, though? That's the question, right? Over what? Some guy we sign in free agency at edge, or a third round guy we can get at edge, which in this draft it might be second round more than third round in my mind. But
yeah,
that is, it's your level of investment has to match that level of replaceability, right?
Sure.
And to me, that's what I worry about at edge in round 1. He has to come out and be Bruce Smith to be able to contribute to this.
He's not a top 10 guy. We're picking at 28. He's still on the board at 28.
That's exactly.
But yeah, if you think he can be that guy, I mean, this is a 4-4 edge player. What's that mean? I don't know. He's explosive, right? We talked about Micah Parsons earlier. Look what he's done for that Dallas defense. Nobody saw that coming. They started him at linebacker before they put him at defensive end, right? So, I mean, you're just looking for those type of athletes. And maybe if you believe the guy's going to work hard, maybe he can develop into a top tier defensive end. I mean, that's really what you would make this pick on, right?
Sure.
And
again,
you can't be mad about that, right?
No, he's not a bad player. I would be happy with the acquisition, but not, it wouldn't be my ideal scenario for the way the board fell, right? Obviously, again, we're talking about those wide receivers in this situation are likely gone, and Robinson would still be there because somebody didn't pick him. They took a wide receiver instead. So it's fine in my mind, but it's not ideal. Yeah. I'm not going to be like a Chop Robinson hater if we draft him. Right. No, I'm going to be perfectly excited to have a player of that caliber. But the moving the needle for this season is not going to be as, high for me on the investment that I want to get out of a first round pick. Right now, at least.
Yeah. And just let's touch on Tez Walker a little bit. Didn't play a lot. Had some injuries, right? The Senior Bowl didn't really impress. But there's still a lot of ability there, right? Tall, lengthy guy, got speed. He can really run a lot of different routes, right? Effectively. You just want to see more production, and you haven't seen that. So he falls to the second round. But I think that's somebody that can definitely put in
Right.
that Gabe Davis role, and he can
Mm-hmm.
probably has more ability in the route running in the bend, but maybe a little less on the speed in the top end. But he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on for sure.
Still a good fit. Yeah, I still would be happy with that acquisition as well. It's somebody who could play that X position and contribute day one, right? I think not as high of a expectation as the other guys we've talked about, but still somebody I would be happy with getting and plugging in. And especially in this scenario where you've gone edge, I think that raises the ability to do wide receiver in
So
round two.
I haven't got you mad yet.
You're right. And we didn't talk about the rest.
How low can you go? Let's go to the next one here. All right. Possibility number 4.
Now I'm mad.
Devondre Sweat and Javen Bullard, the first 2 draft picks for the Bills, first round and second. And then the Bills re-sign Gabe Davis. Right? We're going to let Daquan Jones and Leonard Floyd walk. And then I gave you DJ Chark.
You gave me DJ
I know you like him. So DJ Chark, Derek Barnett, and AJ Dillon, which AJ Dillon's an interesting one. Like,
I do like that one. Yeah.
The projections for him financially they don't seem to be as high as I thought, but those are just projections, right? He could still get paid and be out of the Bills price range. But I was just thinking of so much weight between Josh Allen and AJ Dillon. Every tush push would be successful, right? I mean, there's so many thighs in the back.
And his thighs, right? Yeah,
yes,
right.
Yes.
Yeah, right. The biggest thighs.
Had to go with that.
Okay, let's start with the good, right? I am very high on DJ Chark as a free agent target for the Bills based on where I think the Bills' skill set need is, and he's kind of the handcuff for that wide receiver first round wide receiver that I want the Bills to pick, right? He's speedy, he can block, he can do things like that. He's a veteran, and more importantly, he's not going to get a huge contract likely, right? In my mind. He just came off a season where he was with one of the worst offenses ever, so I don't think you judge his talent level based on that, but and he needs a season to transition, right? He needs, hey, I'm going to go play with Josh Allen, look better than I ever have before next to a Stephon Diggs. I'm going to have opportunities and maximize my potential to get a bigger contract, right? So he has incentive to come in for a cheap deal. I'm thinking like $4 million, $5 million for 1 year, get it done, right? AJ Dillon, I really like him as that. Again, if the deal is right, if he's not getting a lot of money, to be that what is usually considered RB3, really, that ends up being that big body guy who can get the short yardage, right? I would love for him to have that role on this team. I think we've seen AJ Dillon not be able to withstand being a wide running back 1, but he is better when he's in tandem with somebody. So I like that match. Where you lose me, multiple places where you lose me. Gabe Davis, I think, is beyond re-signing in Buffalo. You know, you and I on this show throughout the season, I have said the same thing. I like Gabe Davis. I'm rooting for Gabe Davis. But at the end of the year, goodbye. Have a nice day. I hope you have a great career wherever you end up, because I'm sick of the inconsistency. I don't like that he makes 4 touchdowns and 4 huge plays, and then he can't seem to catch an easy ball when it's in his hands, right, on a big play. So for me, I think it's time to move on from Gabe Davis, both from his perspective and the Bills. I don't think there's any chance of us re-signing him at this point, really. But where I get even angrier, so I don't like the Gabe Davis re-sign, but look, these guys are good. We've already talked about Bullard, and now we've got Sweat in here, who is a huge guy who I would love for the Bills to get. If they draft him in the first round, you have to go wide receiver in the second round. No question about it. You're going to come into this season and you're going to tell me your first 2 draft picks, you're investing in defensive tackle and in safety. You're ignoring the fact that Josh Allen is your quarterback. Your biggest position in need is probably wide receiver. Your biggest talent level is Josh Allen, right? You're ignoring him completely. You're giving him DJ Chark and no first round or big talent wide receiver. I don't know that that's enough. You need to keep your focus on what you do best. And what we do best right now is Josh Allen. Everything Josh Allen, right? You build around that. Sweat is an awesome player. He's a huge body guy. I would love to have him on this team. If they end up, for example, in the scenario number 3 and Sweat's still on the board and they pick him, excellent. But then you're taking wide receiver. There's no question about it. You trade up to get the best wide receiver you want who's still on the board likely in round 2, maybe round 3. But that I would be nauseous if this ends up happening during the
Yes.
draft. I'll be like,
I
you
figured you
drafted
would be.
a defensive tackle and then a safety? What are we doing? Like, this is not good enough. Yeah, just because of the lack of
couple
offense in
things.
Josh Allen.
Yeah. I think there is interest between Gabe Davis and the Bills to re-sign, right? We saw Matt Milano do this. He would take less to stay in Buffalo. Gabe Davis liked in the locker room. He's a captain. And there is no guarantee that a first-round draft pick is going to come in and be more productive than
Correct.
Gabe Davis.
Oh, I don't think they
Right.
will be. But that's, it's more about the money in that situation.
Right. The other thing, too, is talking about supporting Josh Allen. I mean, the continuity is perfect this year. He's got the same offensive line starters next year. Like we said, Kincaid and Knox are back. Shakir's back. James Cook's back. Diggs is back. I mean, it's just that one position, right? So I still think you can help Josh,
Big one.
by bringing back Gabe Davis and adding a guy like DJ Chark, take another shot in free agency. Didn't really work out last year with Hardy and Sherfield, but we could try again, right? You're not worse than you were last year in that scenario. But when we look at like the Kansas City Chiefs, who primarily won with defense this year, right? They kind of reset their offense. That could work, right? And if you think Trevonde Sweat is that player who can really open up opportunities for the edge players at Oliver, the linebackers, I think you pull the trigger on that, right? It's a no-brainer. If you think he can make you better on defense, go for it. Bullard, again, it's just filling that Micah Hyde need. He's a little undersized, but I mean, I think he's a guy he's definitely going to be a starter in the NFL and probably have a long career. Just got a couple things to work on. He gets beat deep a lot, and I think that's something you really got to work on. To be a little hesitant to throw him out there early, but again, Sean McDermott could coach him up. But
yeah,
I don't hate this scenario. At first, I was doing it just to pick on you, and when it came together, I'm like, this is not horrible, right? Because you're the same or better than you were last year. I don't think you're worse on offense, right? And Josh had a great year. And now you have a year off with, Kincaid's going to make a jump. Joe Brady's going to have his own touch on this offense, right? He's in the role longer.
Yes,
so I think you're still better in this scenario, right?
Right. But I still don't think it's likely we sign Gabe Davis. And to be honest, I think Sweat is one of those players. I think Sweat is one of those players who's going to move up draft boards, right? So in my mind, if he's there at 28, the Bills take him. I'm going to be happy with that because I do think he can contribute, and defensive tackle is a big need.
Yeah.
But again, if they take him over one of those wide receivers that I like, they better have a plan for what we're going to do with that wide receiver then. They must say, I could see a scenario where after the draft, they're like, you know what? Sweat was our defensive tackle 1, and he's still on the board, and there was a big gap before our next offensive tackle, whereas wide receiver, there were 5 guys we still liked on the board, and we knew we could get one of them in round 2. Okay, I'm okay with that. That's acceptable logic and breaking down of how they're going to contribute to this team and who's going to contribute to this team. But I do think that Sweat is likely going to be one of those darlings of the draft where it's like, okay,
it's tough.
He could go higher. He could go top 15.
Again, he could go higher because somebody falls in love with his, ability to move at that size.
And
but again, people fall out of love with him because you don't see the explosiveness on tape. So it's, again, I've seen him in the 3rd round all the way up to like the top 20. So he's one of those players that's just polarizing, right? So
Bullard at safety, we've already talked about why I don't want to draft a safety high. He's a good talent. I do think Sean McDermott can turn him into a superstar, but I don't want to invest in safety that early.
Yeah, safety's tough, but I think just get some young players into to compete, right? And this is one way to do that. But we didn't really touch on Derek Barnett, another guy just to fill the Epinesa role.
Yes,
he's been with Houston recently.
I really like that move.
Yeah, just rotating, right? But probably plays 40% of the snaps, right?
Yeah.
Kind of behind Russo and Vaughn if Vaughn's good to go.
And there's still a window of have we seen the best of what that player is capable of, which I like.
He's got one puff left,
Yeah, exactly. You could still go a notch, and maybe the scenario where he's rotating and getting snaps is better for him. So this fills that same kind of depth edge role. Yeah, I love that signing.
All right. So this is not the worst scenario. Okay, I thought this would be the least favorite, but all right. This one might be that. All right, possibility, last one, number 5. Tyler Newman, the top safety in the draft, and then Javon Baker out of UCF, who's just a dog. So fun to watch, right? Not the biggest guy. Got a little speed, but not the fastest. I think he can run. He's got a pretty big route tree, but just competitor, right? So fun to watch him. They re-signed Leonard Floyd and Daquan Jones, and then we're going to sign Josh Kelly because he might have a little bit left.
Hey, that's not bad.
Okay,
That's
if he doesn't, we'll cut him out. And then I like Laviska Shenault. Not
that's your guy.
Not necessarily to fill the Gabe Davis role in the X, but just somebody who can come in and help, right? Gadget plays, stuff we did with Isaiah McKenzie, right? Short dump offs, and he can run and get, some yards after catch. Yes. I think Laviska Shenault has high upside and somebody you can get at kind of a lower price. He didn't work out for him in Jacksonville. It didn't work out for him in Carolina. He's had injuries, but nothing real serious, right? Just a lot of little injuries over time. He just plays with a lot of physicality, so it makes sense he gets injured a lot. But I think you bring him in as the 4 receiver and just dial up a couple plays for him.
Yeah.
He doesn't that limits his snaps, may hopefully limits his injuries, but it can still contribute. So I'm high on Laviska.
Certainly the plays, we've talked about Laviska Shenault on this show since he was in Colorado living with us, right? So when we were still in Colorado and he was still in college. And yeah, I mean, we like the talent, the size, the ability. His tape, his flashy plays that you see, his good plays are awesome, right? They're electric. He has that ability to just be a difference maker on the field. The problem with him is the injuries and the things that have built up, and he's gone multiple places and really hasn't caught on. Now, that doesn't mean he shouldn't be given another shot, right? But I do like him in the role that you explained. I hate calling it this, but that Isaiah McKenzie type role, right? Because
everybody knows what that means.
Yeah. Shenault is way better than Isaiah McKenzie, right? But it's or more, I shouldn't say better, but more talented. He has more to his game than an Isaiah McKenzie does, right? As a gadget player. There's more power there, especially with Shenault. I really like the Josh Kelly idea, right? Here's a veteran guy. You're basically taking that Latavius Murray role and handing it to somebody younger and, a little different. Again here, safety in the first round.
It's the top safety, though.
They
didn't meet with him. There's rumors they met with him today.
Yeah, and the coaching staff and all that. So the connections with the coaching staff are there, but I do not, under any circumstance, even if he's still there, want a safety in the first round. I don't care. To me, even if it is the greatest safety who ever lived, that is not as effective on this team as the other positions of need would be, and some of these other guys who are going to be on the board still at safety. So although it makes sense in a lot of ways, and a lot of people said, hey, don't write this off, this could happen. That is my worst case scenario. Do not pick safety in the first round. Like, I'm not even on board for safety in the second round so much. I'd be okay with it, but not on board with it. And at least here you have us getting a wide receiver in the second round. I'm not sure where Baker is another one of those guys where I think I've seen him as late as like 3 or 4 early on. I mean, he's probably moving up a little more now because wide receivers are just hot in this draft. But
he's probably an early second in most drafts, but in this draft, he's getting pushed way back.
Yeah, but, so there's movement there. That's fine. I mean, he's a good match. I'm okay with it, especially, again, you went defense in the first round. You got to get that second round receiver. You make it happen. If Baker's the guy you like, I'm on board with that. You get Floyd at edge here and Daquan Jones again, which is huge, as we've already discussed. It's just that safety in the first round that I can't do it.
All right, so that's what we got. Again, Leonard Floyd had the same conversation. Probably can't afford him, but in the off chance that he, doesn't get a big offer, he might be interested in coming back. Right, he had a good season in the system. Why not have another good season and go back to the market next year, right? So that's interesting to pay attention to. But which possibility is your favorite so far?
I think this one's okay. I think the second one is still my favorite. Yes. Okay. I would probably say this one is my favorite right now.
Yeah, just because of Brian Thomas Jr.?
No, I like Thomas Jr. I like getting the edge in the second round, and signing the defensive tackle and the safety makes sense to me. So I like that for those reasons. There's 4 yeses for me there. The only question is the Latavius Murray, so I think 2 is probably my favorite scenario. Dare I ask what yours is? Are you going to go 4 just to, mess with me again?
I don't hate 4, but again, I love watching Troy Franklin and Brian Thomas. So yeah, I probably go with I kind of like 1 except for Zach Moss.
Yeah,
right?
that
And
one's
I
more
do
of
know
yeah.
but if you're bringing Leonard Floyd back, I'm at ease, right? Daquan Jones, I think we can get through another year. You'll have Troy Franklin on the roster next year in the draft. The primary focus could be replacing Daquan Jones. But I think I like 1 so far. But really, I think 4 is a close second.
You would. All right.
Yeah,
Hey, you
I
gave
think
me
it is.
DJ Chark. That's my consolation
Yeah.
prize in
Assuming
scenario
Gabe Davis
4.
wants to take a pay cut and the whole thing, and
Yeah, that's unlikely, but yeah.
because I think the defense gets better and your offense gets better as well, right? This is kind of that scenario for me. Your whole team gets better. I mean, I know we all want just the offense to get super, super good, and it may happen, right? You hit on this receiver, I think it could happen. You could have an elite offense. It's already really good, but now it's in that elite category because you have 2 number 1 receivers, right? That would just cause nightmares. And then you have 2 tight ends that could start, right? So that conversation starts to happen. But anyway, all right, that's the 5 possibilities. Going to end it out. Just have a couple cash or trash scenarios, and just let me know if it's cash or trash in your opinion.
Here we go. One of our favorite segments on this show.
I know we don't have our music, and I got to get that back. All right, cash or trash. The Bills need to get aggressive and trade up for a top receiver. And I'm talking Roma Dudze, Malik Neighbors.
Woo! Now
you can get aggressive. You're still probably not going to get Harrison.
Now you're teasing me, huh? Right now you're just teasing me.
Joe Brady, when he was the offensive coordinator at LSU, he had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase.
Yes. So let me tell you, in my world,
there's a lot there, right?
If you can get a Dunze or even any of those top 3, obviously it's not going to happen with Marvin Harrison, but the other 2, to me, there's a line drawn after 3 in this draft, right? Those top 3 guys are the top 3, and they are going to be elite level NFL players in my mind. They're going to be wide receiver 1s, right? The rest, it's more like pairing them with somebody, or do they have the ability to become wide receiver 1? Man, Odunze is my crush. In the beginning, when I was just looking at names at wide receiver, I'm like, this guy, man, I'd love to have him.
Would you give up your 2 and next year's first?
Oh my God, that's mortgaging a lot.
It's going to be
give up. To give up your next year's first that's saying, look, we're going all in with this guy, and we think it's going to happen this way. And I think that if Beane and McDermott did that, they would also have a plan for what they're going to do next year to either end up with 2 second-round picks. Okay, well, we have so-and-so on the roster who might end up getting traded. I think we could get a second for him. And still get something, because I know that Sean McDermott and Beane aren't just going to say, we're happy with giving up our second this year, our first next year to do this, and leave it at that and just end up with a second next year. They will find a way to get creative and get picks. What might factor into there too is the thought of, if we lose a lot of free agents, we might get compensatory picks, and maybe that ends up being another second, another third, which might encourage that to happen as well. And we'll know, and we'll have an idea of that before the draft actually happens. So if that happens, oh my God, consider me throwing a party if that happens. But the likelihood of it happening, I'd have to go trash at this point. I think that Sean McDermott and Beane know that their 10 picks are valuable, and they're going to use them to the best of their ability to retool this team to get the players they think are best. And the ability of the X factor here is not mortgaging that number 1 pick next year either, because they value having.
You got too many needs, right?
Yeah,
the cap situation's too messy right now for something like that. You need these picks, right? You can't be trading all your picks away and have a bad cap situation. That'll be a disaster. And I did mention that Joe Brady's offensive coordinator, who's actually the passing game coordinator. I knew that.
At LSU.
Yeah. His first coordinator game was in Carolina. Anyway, next one, cash or trash. The Commanders will have 2 UNC quarterbacks on their roster next year. A lot of people are mocking, Drake May to the Commanders, but they already have a UNC quarterback in Sam Howell, who I thought really played pretty well at times. A lot of turnovers late, but the whole team was just letting it, quitting basically. They lost 9 games in a row at the end. But it just feels like a weird scenario to have 2 UNC quarterbacks on their roster next year. Do you think this is cash or trash?
Not exactly. The weird thing is this isn't Ohio State or some elite level school that you normally see top players coming out of. What's not weird to me is they have a starting quarterback who's playing well, but they don't know if there's a guy that he's their guy, but he's still under contract. And so meaning they're less likely to trade him away. But they have a scenario where they have that second pick, and I do think it's going to be Drake May, and I do think he's a fit there. I don't think it would be smart of them to give up on Howell, like just say, give us a 5th round pick and you can have him. No way, right? You still have a guy that solidifies the position for you. You have your rookie who you want to be the guy, and a guy who's already started, who's shown potential, and maybe if Drake May catches on, you have the ability to trade more value for Sam Howell. I don't think you give him up. So in the beginning, I'm going cash with this one. It's got to be cash. They're going to have 2 UNC quarterbacks.
Well, you don't think they take Jaden Daniels instead?
No, I don't. I think Daniels is the clear 3rd in my mind. So okay. I don't. If they went Daniels, I would be like, okay, you just did that because you didn't want to have 2 UNC quarterbacks. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
I love Daniels'
that would mean
game.
that. Worse so, that would mean that May ends up in New England, which I don't want to happen. So,
there's a lot of changes with the Commanders. So who knows what they're trying to build? Like it's usually been defense and we'll run the football, right? That's kind of been their motto the last, as far as I can remember now, like last 10 years. But now it seems like trading their 2 edge players, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, feels like they're kind of gonna put some of that money towards the offense and maybe kind of revamp a little bit. But yeah, it's just the debate between Drake May and Jaden Daniels. I think it's a lot of the draft experts like Daniel Jeremiah mentioned. It's like kind of split amongst teams. So that'll be really interesting to pay attention to. But again, are you going prototypical arm talent or are we looking at mobile quarterback, right? Because I think both can succeed now. I would always go with like the prototypical guy. I always do. I always like Herbert in that draft. I liked Josh Allen in the 18 draft. I mean, I always go that route. So I would probably take May, but again, not going to be shocked at all if they go with Jaden Daniels, right? And
really
build the team around him. He looks too much like Tyrod Taylor.
They pick Jaden Daniels. I think they're going to end up starting Sam Howell week 1. So that's the only way I see that happening. And I don't think that makes any sense to me. So
you just don't want Drake May with New England.
Well, I don't want that. No, but I do think they're going to take him. We'll see. Maybe they go and they're like, you know what? The best player in this draft is Marvin Harrison Jr. Just take him and figure the rest out.
Drake May didn't have the best year last year, right?
No.
He kind of had a down year where it's Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. If you're a new owner, a new coach, trying to sell tickets, get the Heisman guy. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. So you go ahead and draft friggin',
All right, here we go. I got 2 more. Cash or trash? Receiver is the Bills' biggest need.
Cash. Money. Cash.
Right now,
you've heard me preach it. You've heard me preach it.
Yeah. It's not the biggest need, though, I don't think.
It depends. I've had this argument with people already this offseason. But
well, again, we don't know what free agency is going to do. They could fill needs in free agency.
Correct.
Right? But as we are today, I think defensive tackle is the biggest need right now.
It depends on how you quantify need. Need for me is what's going to improve this team the most. You could sign 4 Joe Schmo defensive tackles, and I'm happy with it. Give them $2 million each. Great. We've got defensive tackles. I'm good. But wide receiver to me is that position that needs to be addressed the most. And that's why I'm still harping on that. Same with safety. Same with the other positions that need edge. I'm okay with you bringing in Joe Schmo for $2 million, filling out that roster, making it work because I believe in them to be able to do that. Wide receiver is the clear position where we haven't seen a number 1 guy come in and build on that. And they need to, in my mind, they need to. So yeah, cash right now for me.
All right, we'll see. We'll have this same conversation after free agency, and we'll go from there.
Yes, exactly.
Or even after the combine on when the receivers go Saturday at 1. All right, last one for the night. Cash or trash? The Bills need to draft a left tackle and a center early to prepare for 2025. Mitch Morris and Deion Dawkins coming down to the last years of their contract. Should you get ahead of that or just kick the can and worry about that later?
I think this is a kick the can scenario because, I do think they are confident in their tackles, right? They also have swing tackles and backup players on the O-line who can play center, right? So I think they have a plan in place, right? So I'm not drafting a tackle or a center basically in round 1 through 3. If there's still a guy they really like and they get a center, a true center, because Mitch Morse is the only one who I think you have to start thinking about his age and where he's at in his career. Probably, how many more years does he have in the tank? Unless you already say we're going to make, this guy our next center and Morris's move on from him after this season. I don't see it happening where we address O-line early in this draft. So trash for me.
Yeah, Mitch Morris 31, right? It's not like he's 36 or something like that. I mean, Kelsey's 38 or something like that. So I feel like, I know he's had a lot of concussions and everything, but I feel like centers can play a long time, right?
I think it's more likely that they extend him, Mitch Morris, and say, okay, we'll give you a new contract, 3 years, whatever, 21 million or something, and then put dead cap years to open up some cap space and push that money out further. So I think he's more likely to be extended. And again, I think they're happy with their tackles. Spencer Brown stepped up big time. And the fact that this core offensive line was the unit to play the best under Josh Allen so far. And I think they need to take that into consideration as well when they're talking about that. Again, everything focuses on Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I think the point of emphasis last year was to get the offensive line shored up, and they succeeded at that. So I don't think that's one of their points this year. Right now, it's let's kind of get younger on the roster. Let's shore up some of the defensive positions, and then let's replace Gabe Davis. Right.
Draft somebody in the 6th round who ends up on the Patriots starting roster later in the season again. I'd be okay with that.
As long as they're not winning, that's fine, right?
Right.
All right, that's all we got. Thanks for tuning in with us. You can check us out on the Built in Buffalo Network every Thursday at 7:30. You can check us out on the Hoof channel, our own YouTube channel, on Tuesdays. Sometimes 8, sometimes 7:30, depending on what Anthony's
family.
doing.
There's family stuff going on.
Yeah. You can check us out there, and we'll see you next week. Looking forward to the Combine. Really appreciate everybody tuning in with us, and
it's been fun doing this show,
giving us your opinion. So
yeah, it's been fun doing this show. We're happy to be on. Like we said, excited to move forward with this, getting toward free agency and the draft. Still lots to talk about, even though it's the off season. And yeah, always excited to be here and talk football, and couldn't do it without you guys. So thanks for tuning in with us. We'll see you next week.